guys, Jay here. Welcome to Models Memories Weekly, episode 168. Models Memories is a show about nothing and is filmed in front of a live studio audience. This is a show where I talk about my painting, modeling, and working experiences from the week. Now you might be thinking to yourself, Jay, you put out 3 videos a week. Ow! Could I possibly have more to say? Well, I do, and here goes. This week, Games Workshop came out with a really cool new Sister of Battle model, but don't worry, it's not in the Codex. Genestealer Cult got a kick in the shorts, and we're seeing a returning epic hero to Warhammer 40,000. But first, I want to talk about the Genestealer Cult, because we got a really cool article the other day about Brood Brothers. Genestealer Cult can famously have some Astra Militarum units. Historically, like in 8th edition, was Genestealer Cult a thing in 7th edition? I think they were a thing at the tail end of 7th edition, because I remember playing them, I got them immediately. You could bring certain Imperial Guard units. Back in the day, they were just in the Codex. You could have Cult Chimera, you could have Cult Sentinel, you could have Brood Brothers, which were just regular Cadians, but like with Dwarf forehead ridges. And actually, they're still just Dwarf with forehead ridges. But you could have some, and you could have a Leman Russ. And the Leman Russ battle tank was actually pretty good for the cult. Now, 10th edition was kind of annoying because it had a little bit of a keyword system. And so you had to look for certain keywords. I think Astra Militarum and maybe, not Battle Line, but Regiment. And then you had to look for other keywords that you couldn't have, like Ogren or Veteran or Command. And so you had to go through the entire index line by line and try to find all of the data sheets that had the correct keywords and didn't have the incorrect keywords. And it ended up being 7 units. And it's why didn't you just put them in the Genestealer Cult index? But it did lead to some interesting stuff. You could bring things you couldn't bring before, like Rough Riders or a Baneblade. I know at least one person who was bringing a Baneblade, literally because you could bring up to 500 points of Imperial Guard, and so a Baneblade is 470 or 480, and so literally so that you just didn't have to think and you didn't have to move as many models. I'm gonna bring 100 Neophytes, but I don't want to bring 100 Guardsmen, so I'm just gonna bring a Baneblade and call it a day. And then so it led to some fun stuff like that. And so now that we have the Codex coming out, I was really excited to see exactly how they're going to handle Brood Brothers, because I thought, just bring the specific data sheets into the Codex and just keep it nice and simple. 10th edition led to weird things classically, a Cult Chimera could transport whatever it wanted, but in 10th edition, because of keywords, the Chimera index says it can only transport 10 or 12 Astra Militarum units. And you know what my Genestealer cultists don't have? Keyword Astra Militarum. So it could only transport Imperial Guard stuff. There's no way a Neophyte who's just a guardsman could fit inside a Chimera. Only actual Cadians could fit in there. I guess Kriegers or anything else that had infantry and Imperial Guard. But so I was really excited to see what they were gonna do in 10th edition, because it kind of needed to be fixed. It was a little wonky. And so the way they fixed it is, it's still wonky. Actually, it's still just as wonky as it was before, but now it is only for one specific detachment. And that is bizarre. I can't think of anything else that does that. Maybe Chaos, Emperor's Children can take Noise Marines as battle line, but nothing else can take Noise Marines as battle line. But I think that's even still slightly a different way than the ally system. Sisters of Battle can bring Armigers, because anything can bring up to 3 Armigers. It doesn't matter what detachment they're in. But with Genestealer Cult specifically, only this one singular detachment can use the models that people have been collecting for years, because they've always been completely normal to bring in a Genestealer Cult army. And now they are relegated to only one singular detachment. And as a weird cherry on top, the new Kill Team box has Brood Brothers in it. Not to be confused with the Blues Brothers, Brood Brothers. But Brood Brothers are not for the Genestealer Cult army. They're for the Genestealer Cult army in one specific detachment. I don't get it. I totally get making a super cool detachment that's specifically made for allying in Astra Militarum units, and you can bring an extra 500 so you can have half of your army be Imperial Guard and half of your army be Genestealer Cult. That sounds pretty cool. We've seen this a lot. We've got a detachment for the Custodes that really, really makes you want to bring a lot of Sisters of Silence. We got a Tau detachment that's all about bringing tons and tons of Kroot. But you still get to bring Sisters of Silence and Kroot in the regular detachments too. Don't really get it. Is Games Workshop trying to phase out bringing in Astra Militarum units into Genestealer Cult? Is it because Genestealer Cult were so overpowered with their cult ambush ability at the start of 10th edition that they're like, we really want to tread lightly on the Genestealer cult so that it doesn't become a problem again. I don't get it. It's such a weirdly specific stipulation. And it means, like, if I want to bring my Astra Militarum units, I have to play this one detachment. Hopefully, or maybe it'll be my favorite detachment. But I tend to circulate, like I tend to give them all a try just to see like which one I like the best, which one has the best artifacts, which one has the best stratagems that like really fit my playstyle or I really like to use, or that helps me, whichever one helps me beat Sean the best. Like those are the things I really look for in attachment. But now it's like, do I want to bring any Astra Militarum units or do I not want to bring any Astra Militarum units? Because if I want to bring them, there's only one detachment I can use them in. I don't get it. I don't get it, Games Workshop. Look, like my Genestealer Cult army, I do have a bunch of Cult Sentinels, or I guess they're not Cult Sentinels anymore. They're just Sentinels. And if I bring this one detachment, they can become Cult Sentinels. But other than that, I don't have a ton of Astra Militarum stuff. And people weren't bringing a ton of Astra Militarum stuff recently because Cult Ambush is such a phenomenally good rule that you want to bring as many like units as possible that can take that keyword, so you can take advantage of your army rule. So some people were bringing artillery, and there's definitely something to bringing like Death Corps of Krieg or even Cadians for the objective control shenanigans. Like there was definitely some play, but they weren't like, people weren't just bringing, okay, like when people were writing their Genestealer Cult list, they weren't writing a 500 point guard list and then starting to do a Genestealer Cult list. Like it was definitely a little bit of an afterthought or a fun include, but now it's just something else, only for one detachment. Really, really weird. Like if I have a Chimera in my army, I have to really think about how I get to bring it into a game of 40k with my Genestealer Cult. I guess I would just run it as a truck. I mean, you can proxy anything. I could proxy dimes and nickels as units if I wanted to. But yeah, it's a weird and funny and awkward. I don't know what Games Workshop was thinking. How hard would it have been? There used to be like 4 units that from Astra Militarum that you could bring in a Genestealer Cult army. Those are the ones that people own. Why not just throw those into the regular Codex proper, but have this detachment be the one if you want to get weird with it and bring like Rough Riders? Like that would make a lot of sense. But no! I don't get it. Also, Genestealer Cult does not have a lot of units. We're not as bad off as like Squats, but you definitely see a lot of repeats. Like Space Marines, you could bring one, like you could only bring one of each thing and still barely be scratching the surface of how many units are in your codex. But Genestealer Cult, we don't have that much stuff to pick from. So it was kind of nice to get access to some Astra Militarum stuff. But I guess we'll see when the codex comes out. And I definitely buy it with money. I don't get access to it somewhere. When the Codex finally comes out, we'll see. Maybe the Genestealer Cult Codex is the best written, most fun thing under the sun, and I won't even think about wanting to bring any Astra Militarum units, but right now, it feels a little poopy. But speaking of things that are absolutely not poopy, Games Workshop showed off a brand spanking new Sister of Battle miniature, which in my opinion looks way better than Canoness with Jump Pack, but Canoness with Jump Pack is actually in the new codex and this unit is not. But it is a named character from an upcoming novel called Demon Breaker, which is a title I cannot believe they haven't used before. It sounds like the most generic 40k word in the world, but I guess that happens all the time. Like I read a book from 3 years ago called Apocalypse, and it's like, how have they not named a book Apocalypse before now? But it happens. This model is absolutely epic. Everything about it is super cool. The only thing is this model is one of the Swords and Board sisters models. A Celestian Sanker Saint, which are meant to stand on 32mm bases, but she is clearly on like a 50mm base. What base is Saint Celestine on? Because if she's on a 50, I might get this model, put her on a normal base, and put Celestine on this base. Because I really like the little cherubs that are kind of on either of her side. But it's like, even a Canoness is not standing on a 50mm base. Penitent Engines might stand on a 50mm base, but she would be a weird proxy for Penitent Engines. Like, I think that's what I would do just to get this, like, into the army, but appropriate and all correct and tournament legal so I can play games at Warhammer World, which I'm definitely worried about. I don't have proxies galore across my armies. Everything has to be perfectly WYSIWYG, and it has to be Games Workshop official. After I just made fun of acquiring codexes. But yeah, this model is absolutely epic. I love the Melta sword, fire sword. It does look like a magical sword, but it also has the little like Melta or flamer end attached to the grip. So it makes me think that like it's mechanically on fire, not magically on fire. Also, the Sisters of Battle don't particularly like Psykers, so it would make sense for them to not use like chaos warp tainted weaponry. Although that would be cool. In the background, I have been tinkering with, I want a Sister of Battle army, and I want it to be perfect, and I want it to have the most amazing color palette, and I want everything to be amazing, and I'm trying to think of like themes and ideas and like characters and trying to really come up with a backstory so that it can be like a beautifully sculpted army. And for sure, this model would be part of it. I don't know exactly how it would fit, but man, also just like the posing and the storytelling with this model versus Canonos with Jump Pack, who's just jumping off some metal. I really, really like this model. I don't know when it's gonna be available because it says the book's not coming out until later this year. So does that mean the model is not coming out until later this year? And maybe that's fine because I'm certainly not starting a Sisters of Battle army until later this year at the earliest. So I guess we will see what happens. But speaking of the Sisters of Battle and seeing what happens, they got a little rumor with their upcoming codex. They have lost 2 units that were sort of didn't exist, but also were somewhat popular in the competitive scene because they were incredibly cheap scoring units. And that is the Death Cult Assassins and Crusaders. These were old fugly models, but because they were a really low cost unit that like could do actions, they were really, really good for just like you buy them, they cost nothing, you keep them in terrain or you just keep them behind stuff until the turn that you need them, and then they just run onto an objective or they run into table quarters or run onto the table middle, score you those points, die, then you get your miracle dice from the death. Like, it was great, it was beautiful. Those models are now not a part of the Codex and not a part of the Sisters of Battle army anymore. You can still run them as legends or just use the index rules because they're still the same exact model they were last week as they are this week, but they're not gonna be a thing going forward, which feels a little meh. Like, I think we were all, like, it makes perfect sense for them to go away. They were old, they were weird, but it does feel bad that Sisters got 1 new model, but they lost 2 old units. Like, you know, maybe give us 2 cool new models to offset the 2 kind of lame bad old units that are going away. It's like every codex coming out, Games Workshop is pruning. Games Workshop is making 10th edition make more sense, be more correct, be more reasonable. But it is a little sad that like the pruning is happening and it's taken away some of our toys. These units going away, it would have been nice to see new sculpts, and actually they both got new sculpts because Death Cult Assassins came in one of the kill teams, and Crusaders came in Blackstone Fortress. Now, realistically, you couldn't buy those. I think you can still get the kill team, but the Blackstone Fortress definitely gone. You can't buy that anymore. And nobody's buying Blackstone Fortress for 1 Crusader model. You can buy the kind of crummy metal ones for probably way too much money right now, but yeah, a little bit disappointing on the side of the Sisters of Battle. I'm excited to see what the new Codex brings, and please, Games Workshop, pretty please, with a sugar and a cherry on top, let me take Paragon Warsuits in bigger squads than 3. Let me take 6. I want a big squad of stompy robots. I'm a simple man, but that's what I want. But no, only 3. You can only buy 1 box. And then if you want to run another squad, you can buy 1 more 1 box. Like, I want to spend more money, but they won't let me because they won't let me take a squad of 6. I want to absolutely annihilate something with Melta Fire and Pius Vorn, or not Pius Vorn, but Morven Val, the Paragon Warsuit character. I think the only thing I'm more excited for than getting to see how many Paragon Warsuits I can take in 40K is our Patreon. Over there, we have a new set of terrain every single month, and this month we have the Dark Elf Encampment. Soar through the air in the Marauder and then set up camp with the Pleasure Tents, Arena Walls, and the Pleasure Portal. This is a set of characterful terrain pieces and wonderful accessories for the Discerning Elf. And if you always want to be up to date on the goings on here at Eons of Battle and be entered into our monthly giveaways, this month we're picking 3 followers to receive this month's terrain. You can follow the link in the description to sign up to our newsletter. So let me know what you think about all of the codexes. Are you guys excited for your 40k Armies codex coming out? Are you nervous to see what weird changes and omissions Games Workshop is going to make? It's really kind of 50-50. Sometimes we get a codex that knocks it out of the ballpark, and sometimes we get a codex that just leaves us scratching our heads. I don't know. Thanks for watching.